when my husband was standing in the kitchen cooking dinner, humming softly like he always did. I thought it was going to be a normal evening. The house smelled like garlic and warm bread. The lights were soft. The day had been peaceful. Nothing warned me that my life was about to change. His phone buzzed on the counter. A short vibration. Nothing unusual. He wiped his hands on a towel and said, "Can you check it? My hands are messy." I smiled, thinking it was one of his work messages. Maybe a grocery reminder. Maybe a funny meme from his brother. I picked up the phone without a second thought. But when I unlocked the screen, I saw a message from my younger sister. A message that didn't belong on my husband's phone. A message that didn't belong in any normal world. It said, "I can't abort it." For a moment, I thought I was reading someone else's phone. Maybe I misread her name. Maybe there were two people with the same name. Maybe it was a wrong number. But it wasn't. It was her. My sister. Texting my husband. My heart froze, but my hands didn't shake. I didn't react. I didn't gasp. I didn't let out a single sound. That I just stared at those words. Simple. Cold. Heavy enough to sink a life. I lifted my eyes toward my husband. He was stirring the pot, completely relaxed. My mind ran through every memory of them in the same room. Every laugh. Every conversation. Every moment that suddenly looked different under this new light. My whole world was folding in on itself, quietly, like paper burning from the inside. He turned slightly and said, "Everything okay?" And I heard myself answer, calm and steady, "Yeah, everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Something inside me decided, in that moment, not to explode, not to crumble, not to scream. Instead, I replied to her message, still pretending to be him, still calm. I typed, "Come over," and pressed send. This was the beginning of the truth, the beginning of the quiet storm. To understand why I reacted the way I did, you need to know what my life looked like before that message. You need to know the softness I believed in, the trust one carried like a warm blanket, the simple, peaceful world I thought I lived in. My husband, Daniel, was not a dramatic man, or at least he didn't seem like one. He was gentle. He cooked most nights. He left small notes on the fridge to remind me to drink water. He would put a hand on my back when we walked together, guiding me gently though he didn't need to. We had been married for 7 years. Not perfect years, but steady ones. The kind of steady that makes you believe nothing dangerous could ever sneak in. The kind of steady that makes you feel safe. My sister, Layla, was 5 years younger than me. She was the bright one, the wild card of the family. She loved taking pictures, traveling, meeting people. I often felt protective of her, like an older sister should. She came to our house often. She called me for advice. She made jokes about how she wanted a marriage like mine. Sometimes she'd say, "You're lucky, you know. Daniel treats you so well." I believed her. I believed everything. Not once did I imagine they spoke behind my back. Not once did I wonder why her visits increased. Not once did I connect the small dots, the ones that look harmless until they form a picture. Life has a way of hiding the truth in plain sight. Before that message, the day had been simple. The morning sun was soft. Daniel kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I cleaned the living room, did a bit of laundry, watched a cooking show. Around afternoon, Layla posted a picture online, a simple mirror selfie. I liked it. She liked my comment. Nothing strange. Around 6 p.m., Daniel came home with groceries. I teased him about forgetting the tomatoes again. He laughed. We moved around the kitchen like we always did, easy and familiar. And then his phone buzzed. It's incredible how one vibration can divide life into before and after. I didn't confront him. I didn't shout. I didn't break. A strange calm filled me. Like I was watching a movie where I was the main character, but also an observer sitting somewhere far away from my own body. I kept imagining the meaning of those 6 words. I can't abort it. There was no way to misunderstand them. No way to twist them into something innocent. It meant there had been something between them. Something that crossed every line. Something physical. And now something irreversible. But I needed to see her face. I needed to hear her speak. I needed to witness the truth with my own eyes. So I told her to come. I didn't know what I was going to do when she arrived. I just knew I had to face this quietly, in the same calm tone she had shattered. For the next 20 minutes, while we waited for her, I kept watching Daniel. Every time he turned, I studied his eyes, wondering how many lies lived behind them. He didn't seem worried. He didn't suspect a thing. He didn't ask who messaged him. He trusted me the way I had trusted him. Finally, the doorbell rang. I felt my heartbeat rise, not fast, just heavy, like a slow drum in a quiet room. "I'll get it," I said. Daniel didn't think anything of it. He just nodded. When I opened the door, Layla stood there, her eyes already red from crying. She didn't even look at me at first. Her gaze moved past my shoulder, searching for him. "Daniel, is he?" she whispered. I stepped aside slowly. "Come in," I said. My voice didn't betray a single emotion. She walked inside, nervous, shaking, clutching her phone. Daniel turned from the stove, surprised. "Oh, Layla? Everything okay?" he asked, innocent confusion in his voice. In that moment, I saw something in her expression. A flicker. A shift. Something that told me they both knew. Not just her. Not just him. Both. I closed the door behind her gently, the click sounding louder than it should have. Then I walked toward them, my husband and my sister, standing only a few feet apart, both pretending not to understand the ground they stood on. The air felt tight, but nobody moved. I looked at Daniel first, then at Layla, then back at the phone in my hand. And softly, so softly it almost sounded like a sigh, I asked, "Do either of you want to tell me what this means?" I turned the screen toward them, showing the message. Layla's breath caught. Daniel's eyes widened. And for the first time since the vibration, the peaceful world I lived in finally cracked. The moment I held up the phone with my sister's message glowing on the screen, the entire room shifted. Not physically, but emotionally, like the air had thickened, like something invisible had wrapped itself around us, pulling tight. Daniel froze with the wooden spoon still in his hand. Layla stood with her arms pulled close to her chest, like she was trying to shield herself from the truth even though she had created it. No one spoke at first. The quiet was strange. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just heavy. Like a silence that had been waiting a long time for this moment. Finally, Daniel said my name in a soft, trembling voice. "Anna, what are you talking about?" His confusion sounded too clean. Too practiced. Too safe. I didn't take my eyes off him. I didn't raise my voice or cry. Instead, I repeated slowly, "Do you want to tell me what this means?" I angled the phone again so he could see the message. The words "I can't abort it" shone like a wound. Layla let out a small gasp, almost like she had been shot, and whispered, I didn't think." She couldn't finish. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears pooling in her eyes. Daniel lowered his eyes. Layla whispered something so faint I almost didn't hear it. 3 months. 3 months. Long enough for them to exchange messages behind my back. Long enough for them to hide in silence. Long enough for the truth to grow literally, inside her. My heart didn't break loudly. It didn't shatter. It just sank. Deep, deep inside me, like it was trying to hide from this new reality. I pulled out a chair and sat down at the dining table. My movements were slow and controlled, like every step was happening underwater. I said softly, "Tell me everything." Daniel put down the wooden spoon because his hands were shaking too much. He came closer but didn't dare to sit. He started speaking, voice low and shaky. It wasn't planned. I swear to you. That night, after everyone left, Layla said she forgot something here. I told her I'd help her find it while you were upstairs changing. I remembered that night clearly. I had changed into pajamas. I was tired. I thought they were downstairs cleaning up the dishes. He continued. We were talking, and then one thing led to another. It was stupid. It was reckless. It was wrong. It never happened again. Layla pressed both hands to her stomach, maybe instinctively, maybe in fear, and whispered, I thought it would go away. I thought it would be fine. But then I missed my period, and I panicked. I told Daniel. I didn't know what to do. My whole body felt cold. You told him before you told me? I asked. Layla nodded slowly. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to ruin everything. But you already did, I said, my voice barely above a breath. There was no bitterness in my tone, no anger. Just simple truth. Daniel crouched in front of me, but I moved my chair back a little. He noticed. And for the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. Anna, please. Say something. Yell at me. Cry. Do anything. Just don't be this quiet. But quiet was all I had left. Quiet was the only thing holding me together. I looked at him and asked, Do you love her? His eyes widened. Layla's breath caught. He shook his head instantly. No. God, no. It wasn't love. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I turned to my sister. Do you love him? She sucked in a sharp breath, her shoulders trembling. No. I don't. I was lonely. I was stupid. I wasn't thinking. Daniel stepped closer again. We didn't plan anything. We didn't continue it. We regretted it immediately. I swear to you. I listened. Not believing, not disbelieving. Just listening. Then I asked the question that would decide everything. And the baby? Silence. Layla's hand stayed on her stomach. Her eyes filled again. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I'm scared. I feel sick all the time. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Daniel rubbed his forehead hard. We were trying to figure it out. I told her I'd help financially. We didn't want to burden you with this. Burden me. Like I was some stranger. Like I wasn't the wife. Like the truth was something they needed to manage. I closed my eyes for a moment. The image of my husband cooking, humming happily. The image of my sister texting him from somewhere, with fear and secrets tangled around her heart. The image of me, unlocking his phone, believing I lived in a simple world. All of it came together. All of it made sense in a twisted way. The truth wasn't just about betrayal. It was about trust that had slowly eroded, silently, without my noticing. I opened my eyes again and said calmly, Leave. They both looked confused. Daniel whispered, Leave what? Leave the kitchen, I said softly. Give me space. I wasn't ready to explode. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't ready to understand. I just needed space. Daniel hesitated, but then he nodded. Layla stepped back, tears streaming down her face. They both walked out of the room, separately, leaving me alone, with the smell of garlic and warm bread, the dinner he had almost finished cooking, and a silence that felt too big for one person. For a moment, I put my hand over my mouth and breathed slowly, deep in, deep out. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I needed the truth. All of it. Every piece. And I knew the next conversation would be even harder. For a few minutes, I sat alone at the dining table, listening to the soft simmer of the pot on the stove. The food smelled warm and comforting, as if it still believed it belonged to a normal evening. The kitchen light flickered slightly, and my shadow stretched long across the floor. I folded my hands in front of me and stared at them. They looked steady, calm, unshaken. But inside, something fragile was cracking slowly, like thin glass under pressure. I didn't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. Time felt strange, slow and heavy, like I was trapped inside a moment that refused to move forward. Eventually, I stood up. I knew they were waiting. He was in the living room. She was in the guest room. Separated now. The first time in months, it seemed. I walked into the living room first. Daniel stood up when he saw me. His eyes were red, though he wasn't crying. He looked afraid to speak, afraid even to breathe loudly. "Anna," he whispered, "please talk to me." I sat on the far end of the sofa, creating a distance between us. Not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet, necessary space. He sat back down slowly, like he was afraid the cushions themselves would judge him. For a moment, I didn't look at him. I looked at the window instead, the night outside, the faint reflection of myself. Then I spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel closed his eyes, like he expected the question but still didn't know how to answer. "I was terrified," he said. "I didn't know how to say it without destroying everything. I thought maybe she would take care of it, and you'd never have to know." I breathed in softly. Those last words hurt in a quiet, deep way. "You didn't want to hurt me," I said slowly. "But you hurt me anyway. Only now it's worse." He nodded, tears finally touching his eyelashes. "I know. And I'm so sorry." Sorry. Such a small word for such a large wound. I kept my tone soft. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me? Or did you only think about saving yourself?" His shoulders dropped. "I thought about you every day," he said. "I hated myself for what happened. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't. Every time I looked at you, I felt ashamed. Shame. Guilt. Secrets. But none of them stopped him from letting the truth live between him and my sister." I asked him one more time. "Do you love her? Even in a small way?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead he whispered, "No. But I cared about her because she's your sister." And that made everything even more confusing. I nodded slowly. Not because I understood, but because there was nothing left to say to him at that moment. "I need to speak to Layla now," I said quietly. He stood up instantly. "Anna, please don't be hard on her. She's scared." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. "Daniel, you lost the right to ask me for anything." That sentence stopped him. He nodded once. Then he stepped aside and let me pass. I walked toward the guest room. My feet felt heavy, as if each step carried the weight of a new truth. Before I opened the door, I paused. I could hear soft crying on the other side. Not loud, not dramatic, just the quiet sound of someone breaking in a small, fragile way. I knocked gently. "Layla," I said softly. "Can I come in?" Her crying stopped abruptly, like she was trying to gather herself. "Why, yes," she whispered. I opened the door. She sat on the bed with her knees pulled to her chest, her hair messy, her face wet with tears. She looked younger than she was. Vulnerable, but also guilty. She wiped her cheeks when she saw me. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I swear." I closed the door quietly behind me and sat in the chair near the window. "I know," I said. "But it did happen." She cried harder, covering her face with her hands. "I messed up. I ruined everything." I watched her for a moment. My sister, the girl I grew up with, the one I used to braid hair for, the one I covered for when she snuck out as a teenager. I felt pain, yes, but I also felt something else. A strange mix of betrayal and protection. "You should have come to me," I said gently. "Before you went to him. Before any of this." She nodded desperately. "I didn't know how. I was ashamed. I thought you'd hate me." I kept my voice soft. "I don't hate you." She looked up with swollen eyes, surprised. "Really?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "No. I'm hurt. Deeply. But I don't hate you." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I don't know what to do about the baby." I looked at her stomach, then at her face. "How far along are you?" I asked. "Almost 3 months," she whispered. "I found out last week." 3 months. 3 months of them carrying a secret together. "What do you want to do?" I asked quietly. "I don't know," she said, her voice tiny. "I'm scared. I can't make this choice alone." For the first time since the message appeared on his phone, I felt my chest rise with something warm. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but something close to calm. "You're not alone," I said. She stared at me, confused. "I don't know what's going to happen next," I continued. "I don't know what I'll decide about my marriage. I don't know what you'll decide about the baby. But whatever happens, I need honesty. No more secrets." Layla nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I promise. No more secrets. Not ever." I took a slow breath. Then I said the one thing she needed most. She broke down again, but this time it wasn't the same kind of crying. It wasn't fear-filled or panic-filled. It was relief. The kind that comes when someone holds a part of your pain, so it doesn't crush you completely. I reached out and placed my hand gently on hers, and she held it like she was afraid it might vanish if she let go. Later that night, after leaving her to rest, I walked back into the kitchen. The food on the stove was overcooked now. The dinner we never ate. The life we never expected. I turned off the stove slowly. The house felt different. Wider. Emptier. Filled with truths that didn't fit inside its walls anymore. Daniel waited near the hallway, but didn't say anything. We just looked at each other. Two people standing in the aftermath of a quiet storm. I didn't speak. He didn't either. But we both knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the house felt unfamiliar. Like I had woken up inside the same walls, but inside a different life. The light coming through the curtains was soft, almost gentle, as if it didn't know what had happened the night before. Or maybe it did, and it was trying not to make anything worse. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, my hands resting on my lap, staring at the floor. I felt tired, but not in my body. It was the kind of exhaustion that sits in the heart. Quiet, heavy, and impossible to shake off. I could hear movements in the kitchen. Soft ones. Careful ones. Daniel. He was trying not to disturb me. Maybe he was making coffee. Maybe he was pacing. Maybe he was preparing himself for a future. He suddenly felt slipping away. I finally stood up and walked to the bathroom. I washed my face slowly, watching the water drip from my chin. My reflection looked calm. Too calm. Like someone wearing an expression that wasn't completely hers. When I stepped out into the hallway, the smell of coffee drifted toward me. I hadn't eaten dinner last night. She broke down again, but this time it wasn't the same kind of crying. It wasn't fear-filled or panic-filled. It was relief. The kind that comes when someone holds a part of your pain, so it doesn't crush you completely. I reached out and placed my hand gently on hers, and she held it like she was afraid it might vanish if she let go. Later that night, after leaving her to rest, I walked back into the kitchen. The food on the stove was overcooked now. The dinner we never ate. The life we never expected. I turned off the stove slowly. The house felt different. Wider. Emptier. Filled with truths that didn't fit inside its walls anymore. Daniel waited near the hallway, but didn't say anything. We just looked at each other. Two people standing in the aftermath of a quiet storm. I didn't speak. He didn't either. But we both knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the house felt unfamiliar. Like I had woken up inside the same walls, but inside a different life. The light coming through the curtains was soft, almost gentle, as if it didn't know what had happened the night before. Or maybe it did, and it was trying not to make anything worse. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, my hands resting on my lap, staring at the floor. I felt tired, but not in my body. It was the kind of exhaustion that sits in the heart. Quiet, heavy, and impossible to shake off. I could hear movements in the kitchen. Soft ones. Careful ones. Daniel. He was trying not to disturb me. Maybe he was making coffee. Maybe he was pacing. Maybe he was preparing himself for a future. He suddenly felt slipping away. I finally stood up and walked to the bathroom. I washed my face slowly, watching the water drip from my chin. My reflection looked calm. Too calm. Like someone wearing an expression that wasn't completely hers. When I stepped out into the hallway, the smell of coffee drifted toward me. I hadn't eaten dinner last night. I wasn't sure if I could eat now. Still, I walked toward the kitchen. Daniel stood by the counter, his hands wrapped around a mug but not drinking from it. When he saw me, he straightened instantly, like he was waking up from a long, uneasy dream. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied with the same quiet tone. He motioned toward the table. "I made you coffee, if you want it." I sat down. "Thank you." He poured it carefully, like he was afraid even the sound of the liquid might break me. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for the heat. For a few moments, neither of us said anything. Then he broke the silence. "Did you sleep?" "A little," I said. He nodded. "I didn't sleep much." "I know," I replied softly. "I could hear you walking around." His shoulders dropped slightly. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize for that," I said. "There are bigger things." He swallowed hard. "I know." The quiet stretched again. Finally he whispered, "Anna, what are you thinking?" I took a slow breath. "I'm thinking about everything," I said. "About you. About her. About the baby. About myself." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No. I don't hate you." He looked surprised. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe he expected screaming. But that wasn't who I was. "I'm hurt," I said softly. "Very hurt. But hate, no. Hate doesn't come this easily." He closed his eyes for a moment, almost in relief, but grief followed right after. "Anna," he whispered, "I don't want to lose you." I looked at him carefully, his tired eyes, his trembling fingers, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. "You already lost parts of me," I said. "The trust one had. The belief that our life was stable. The feeling that home was safe." He bowed his head. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm so sorry. Being sorry doesn't fix things," I said gently. "But it's a start." He nodded slowly. I took another sip of coffee, letting it warm me from the inside. Then I asked, "What do you want to happen now?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "With the baby," I said quietly. "With her. With us. With everything." His hands shook around his mug. "I want you," he said. "I want our marriage. I want to fix this. I want to take responsibility for what I did, but I don't want to lose you in the process." "And the baby?" He hesitated, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know the right words. "I'll support whatever she decides," he said. "But I don't want you to leave our life over something that shouldn't have happened." "Something that did happen," I corrected gently. He nodded quickly. "Yes, something that did happen." I touched the handle of my cup, running my thumb along it slowly. "Have you thought about the baby being yours?" I asked. He froze, then whispered, "Yes." "And?" I asked softly. He took a deep breath, voice trembling. "If the baby is mine, I will take responsibility. I'll be there. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do that without hurting you more." I swallowed slowly. "And if the baby isn't yours?" I asked. He looked down at the table. "Then she still needs support. She's still family." I nodded. Even now maybe he expected screaming. But that wasn't who I was. "I'm hurt," I said softly. "Very hurt. But hate, no. Hate doesn't come this easily." He closed his eyes for a moment, almost in relief, but grief followed right after. "Anna," he whispered, "I don't want to lose you." I looked at him carefully, his tired eyes, his trembling fingers, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. "You already lost parts of me," I said. "The trust one had. The belief that our life was stable. The feeling that home was safe." He bowed his head. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm so sorry. Being sorry doesn't fix things," I said gently. "But it's a start." He nodded slowly. I took another sip of coffee, letting it warm me from the inside. Then I asked, "What do you want to happen now?" He looked confused. What do you mean? With the baby, I said quietly. With her. With us. With everything. His hands shook around his mug. I want you, he said. I want our marriage. I want to fix this. I want to take responsibility for what I did, but I don't want to lose you in the process. And the baby? He hesitated. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know the right words. I'll support whatever she decides, he said. But I don't want you to leave our life over something that shouldn't have happened. Something that did happen, I corrected gently. He nodded quickly. Yes, something that did happen. I touched the handle of my cup, running my thumb along it slowly. Have you thought about the baby being yours? I asked. He froze, then whispered, yes. And I asked softly. He took a deep breath, voice trembling. If the baby is mine, I will take responsibility. I'll be there. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to do that without hurting you more. I swallowed slowly. And if the baby isn't yours? I asked. He looked down at the table. Then she still needs support. She's still family. I nodded. Even now, his guilt tied him to her. I don't know if I can be part of that, I said quietly. He looked up sharply, fear flashing across his eyes. Please, he whispered. Please don't say that. I'm not leaving right now, I said. I'm not making any final decisions today. But I need you to understand something. He waited terrified. This isn't something I'll get over in a week. Or a month. Or maybe even a year. This is the kind of hurt that changes the shape of a marriage. His chin trembled. I know. And if the baby stays, I whispered, our lives will never be the same. He nodded, tears slipping down his face, silent, slow. I will do whatever you need, he said. I'll give you space. I'll sleep in a different room. I'll go to therapy. I'll answer every question you have. I'll tell the truth about everything. Just don't push me out completely. Please. I looked at him for a long moment. He meant what he said. But meaning something and living it were different. Finally, I stood up. Daniel, I said gently. I need to be the one who talks to her today. Alone. He nodded immediately. Of course. I understand. I need to hear everything in her words, I added. Without you there. Without your guilt or fear. Just her truth. He wiped his face quickly and whispered, I'll stay out of the way. I took a slow breath. My heart hurt, but my body felt steady. I'm going to her now, I said. He stepped aside. But before I reached the hallway, he said my name softly. Anna. I turned. He stood there with a helpless expression, like a man watching the most important thing in his life slip through his fingers. I love you, he whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and answered honestly, gently. I know. But love isn't enough right now. I kept telling myself I was imagining everything. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was scared of losing my family. So every small thing felt bigger than it was. But the truth is, some things were too heavy to ignore. One evening, I remember standing at the sink, washing the last few plates after dinner. The warm water felt nice on my hands. The house was quiet. My husband and son were in the living room watching TV. My daughter-in-law, Aisha, was scrolling on her phone at the table. Everything looked normal. But inside, I felt a small ache that never went away. While I washed, I heard whispering. Not loud. Not suspicious on purpose. Just soft enough that my heart noticed. I heard my daughter-in-law say, she needs to stop interfering. There was a pause. Then my son replied quietly, she's just trying to help. But his voice sounded tired. Not angry. Not loving. Just tired. And that hurt more than any argument could. I didn't turn around. I didn't ask who they were talking about. I just kept washing the plate in my hands, even though it was already clean. A few minutes later, my son came up behind me. He said softly, Mom, you don't have to wash everything. Leave it. I'll do it. I smiled at him, but it felt weak. It's okay, I whispered. I like keeping our home tidy. He nodded, but his eyes had something in them. Something like guilt, or confusion, or pressure. Maybe all three. As he walked away, Aisha didn't look at me. She just stared at her phone, her fingers tapping fast, her lips pressed tight. I sat at the table later that night and thought, when did I stop being part of the home? When did I become a burden they needed to manage? The thought made me feel small, but I kept it inside. A few days later, something happened that shook me in a deeper way. I had gone to the market early in the morning. It was raining lightly, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. I bought vegetables, a few things for the house, and a packet of sweets for my son, his childhood favorite. When I came home, I heard voices inside the house before I even opened the door. My son was upset, not shouting, but his tone was heavy, filled with stress. He said, "Why are you making it sound like she's doing something wrong? She's my mother." Aisha replied sharply, "I didn't say she did something wrong. I'm just saying I need space. Everything feels so crowded." My hand froze on the door handle. My breath got stuck. Crowded. Space. Wrong. Words can be simple, but they can break a heart if they land the wrong way. I pushed the door open quietly. They didn't notice me at first. My son looked frustrated, rubbing his forehead. Aisha looked annoyed, her arms crossed. I placed the grocery bags on the counter, pretending not to hear anything, pretending everything was fine. My son saw me and forced a smile. "Mom, you got wet in the rain? Come inside, don't stand there." I nodded gently, feeling my clothes cold against my skin. Aisha didn't say anything. She just walked past me and went upstairs. The silence she left behind felt sharp. My son touched my arm. "Mom, you okay?" "Yes," I said softly. But inside I wasn't. Inside, I felt like someone had slowly taken my chair away from the table. And I was the only one still standing, trying to pretend I had a place. That evening, something even more unsettling happened. My husband came home later than usual. He walked into the kitchen, tired and distracted. I asked him, "Everything okay?" He nodded, but he didn't look at me. He went straight to his phone, typing something quickly. I was stirring the curry on the stove when I heard his phone vibrate again. A message. Another message. I didn't look. I didn't ask. But his face changed when he read it. His eyebrows pulled together. His lips tightened. He swallowed hard. Then he turned the screen face down. I always believed something that families break quietly. Not with shouting. Not with chaos. But with small silences one after another, until the distance becomes too wide to cross. I didn't know I was standing at the edge of something that would change my whole life. I didn't know the moment was coming. The one that would leave me breathless, confused, and heartbroken. It began on an ordinary afternoon. The sun was warm. The house was peaceful. Nothing looked wrong. My husband was in the kitchen cooking. He always cooked on Sundays. It was the one day he gave me rest, saying, "Go sit. I'll handle it." I smiled at him as I set the table. My son was upstairs. My daughter-in-law was folding laundry in the living room. Everything looked calm. But sometimes the biggest storms come during the quietest days. My husband's phone vibrated on the shelf beside the stove. He glanced at it while stirring the pot. A message. His face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not anger. Not joy. Not stress. It was fear. A deep, sudden fear that flashed across his eyes before he forced his expression back to normal. I froze for a moment, holding a spoon in my hand. He picked up the phone quickly, wiping his hands on a towel. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the screen. I watched him. Not purposely. Not secretly. Just naturally. Because when you live with someone for decades, you read their silence louder than their words. He stared at the message for a long time. Too long. Then he typed something fast. His shoulders tightened. His breathing changed. I didn't want to interrupt, so I turned back toward the table. But then it happened. His phone buzzed again. The message preview popped up before he could hide it. I didn't see the whole line, just the last few words. But they were enough to shake my entire world. It said, "I can't abort it." My hands went cold. The room spun for a moment. Abort? Why would someone say that to my husband? Like my heart had forgotten how to beat. My husband glanced at me, and in that split second, I knew he saw the fear on my face. He quickly grabbed the phone, turning the screen away. He said softly, "It's nothing. Wrong number." But his voice cracked. A crack so small, but deep enough to break a marriage. I felt my throat tighten as I whispered, "You seem worried." He shook his head too quickly, like a child caught doing something he shouldn't. "It's work," he said. "Just stress. Go sit. I'll finish cooking." But he couldn't meet my eyes. Not even for 1 second. That was the moment I felt something inside me fall apart, quietly without sound. A small truth whispered inside me. Something is happening. Something he doesn't want me to know. I placed the spoon down carefully, afraid my shaking would make it fall. I walked out of the kitchen slowly, pretending I was fine. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, tears slipped down my cheeks on their own. I wiped them quickly. I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't want to break. Not yet. I sat on the sofa in the living room, staring at the wall, hearing the faint sound of vegetables sizzling in the pan. My daughter-in-law, Aisha, was folding a towel. She looked up and immediately noticed my face. "Auntie, are you okay?" Her voice was gentle, but I didn't know how to answer. I forced a small smile and nodded. Yes, I'm fine." She didn't look convinced. She placed the towel aside and came closer. "Auntie, you're shaking." I didn't realize it until she said it. My hands were trembling in my lap. Before I could think of a reply, my husband's phone vibrated again from the kitchen. This time the vibration felt louder, like it was shaking the floor. Or maybe shaking my heart. Aisha looked toward the kitchen, then back at me. "Auntie, is everything okay with Uncle?" Her question hit me somewhere deep. She didn't look convinced. She placed the towel aside and came closer. "Auntie, you're shaking." I didn't realize it until she said it. My hands were trembling in my lap. Before I could think of a reply, my husband's phone vibrated again from the kitchen. This time, the vibration felt louder, like it was shaking the floor, or maybe shaking my heart. Aisha looked toward the kitchen, then back at me. "Auntie, is everything okay with Uncle?" Her question hit me somewhere deep, somewhere fragile. But before I could speak, my husband called from the kitchen. "Lunch is ready." His voice sounded forced, too cheerful, too controlled. I stood up slowly, still trying to keep myself steady. But inside, something was breaking in slow motion. During lunch, he kept his phone next to his plate, face down. He had never done that before. Every time it buzzed, he flinched. Every time he flinched, my heart trembled. My son noticed it too. I saw the confusion in his eyes, but he didn't ask anything. Nobody asked. Maybe we were all scared of the answer. The whole meal felt heavy. My husband barely ate. He kept wiping his hands on his napkin, even when his hands were clean. A nervous habit I had never seen before. After lunch, he stood up quickly and said, "I need some air." He grabbed his phone and walked out of the back door. The silence he left behind felt like a stone in my chest. I stared at his empty chair, and for the first time in my marriage, I felt truly alone. Aisha placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "Auntie, if something is wrong, you can tell me." I swallowed hard. I don't know yet. And that was the truth. I didn't know, but I knew enough to be afraid. 10 minutes later, I gathered enough courage to go to the kitchen and clean up. As I wiped the counter, I saw something that made my heart stop again. My husband had forgotten to take his towel with him. It was still hanging over the stove, and under it, part of his phone screen was visible. A message still open. One single line glowing on the screen. "I need to come over." We need to talk. The sender's name made my entire body freeze. It was my sister. My own sister. My knees weakened. My breath caught. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep myself from falling. Why was she talking about abortion? Why was she texting my husband? Why was she saying she needed to come over? My heart was beating so fast it hurt. At that moment, I felt something deep inside me break open, like a truth trying to escape from the dark. I picked up his phone with shaking hands, and without thinking, without planning, I typed a reply on his behalf. 3 simple words. Come over. My hands trembled as I hit send. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what truth I was walking toward. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live in fear anymore. Whatever was happening, I needed to see it, face it, know it, even if it destroyed me, because sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to walk straight into it. After I sent the message, come over, I stood still in the kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the weight of my own heartbeat. I didn't know what I wanted to happen. I didn't know what truth would walk through that door. But I knew I couldn't turn back now. My hands were cold. My legs felt weak. My breath came in small, shaky pieces. I placed the phone back exactly where my husband had left it, as if nothing had happened. Then I walked to my room, and sat at the edge of the bed. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. My son was upstairs. My daughter-in-law was hanging clothes on the balcony. My husband was still outside, pacing, talking on the phone. I could hear his muffled voice through the window, and every word felt like a knife I wasn't ready to touch. I sat there for a long time, staring at the floor, repeating the same thought. She's my sister. Why would she text him? Why those words? Why that message? The more I tried to justify it, the more something inside me crumbled. There are moments in life when your mind refuses to lie to you anymore. This was one of those moments. An hour later, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the whole house like thunder. I froze. My daughter-in-law called out from the balcony, "Auntie, someone's at the door." My heart almost stopped. I stood up slowly, as if every movement required strength I didn't have. When I reached the hallway, my husband was already inside, walking toward the entrance, his face pale, his steps fast, almost panicked. He must have seen the same notification on his phone. He must have realized someone had replied. He must have known she was coming. He opened the door before I reached him. And there she was, my sister, standing on my doorstep. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were swollen, like she had been crying for hours. Her hands shook as she clutched her bag to her chest. She stepped inside without looking at me first. She looked straight at my husband. The moment their eyes met, I saw something that broke my heart. Familiarity. Not surprise. Not confusion. Familiarity. As if this wasn't the first time they were facing something together. My chest tightened painfully. My sister finally turned her eyes to me. Her lips parted. "Sister. I didn't know you," replied. Her voice cracked. My husband shot her a warning look, sharp, quick, desperate. That small exchange told me everything. And nothing. All at once. I swallowed hard. "I saw the message," I said quietly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I just felt emptied. My sister closed her eyes tightly, as if bracing herself. My husband stepped forward quickly. "It's not what you think," he said. His voice trembled as badly as my hands earlier. I nodded slowly. "Then tell me what it is." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Not a word. He looked guilty. He looked trapped. He looked terrified. And that terrified me. Aisha walked into the hallway confused. She looked at my sister, then at my husband, then at me. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Nobody answered. The silence was too heavy. My sister suddenly broke down, covering her face with both hands. "I can't hide it anymore," she sobbed. I can't do this alone." My heart felt like it was splitting open. I reached forward, instinctively wanting to comfort her. She was my sister, after all. But my husband grabbed her arm gently, trying to calm her, whispering, "Not here. Not now. Please." The whisper wasn't just panic. It was fear of the truth. My son came down the stairs, confused by the noise. "What's going on?" he asked. Still no one answered. The room felt like a burning house, but everyone was too scared to run. My sister wiped her face, breathing heavily. She looked at me with eyes full of pain. I made a mistake," she whispered. "A big mistake." My husband looked like he couldn't breathe. I felt my legs tremble, but I stayed standing. "Tell me," I said softly. My sister opened her mouth, paused, closed her eyes, and then she said the words that shattered every piece of my heart. "The baby is your husband's." The world around me disappeared. The floor tilted. The walls blurred. The air turned cold. I felt like someone had thrown me into the deepest dark water, and I didn't know how to breathe. My son gasped. Aisha covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes instantly. My husband stepped forward quickly. "It's not like that," he began. But I lifted my hand slightly, and for the first time in my entire life, he stopped speaking because of a single gesture from me. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just whispered. "How long?" My husband couldn't answer. My sister sobbed harder. "How long?" I repeated. My voice was calm. Too calm. 7 months, my sister whispered. 7 months. 7 months of betrayal. 7 months of silence. 7 months of secrets living under the same roof as me. My knees almost gave out, but I held on to the wall. My husband stepped toward me, his face filled with guilt and fear. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered. I blinked slowly, but it did. He nodded weakly. Tears formed in his eyes. My sister sobbed uncontrollably now, sinking to the floor. "I didn't want the child," she cried. "I told him, but he said we would figure it out. But I can't. I can't go through this alone. I can't hide this from you anymore." The word alone stung me like a knife, because she wasn't alone. I was the one who suddenly felt alone. The room was filled with crying, and silence, and heartbreak. My son looked frozen, shocked. Aisha was crying quietly, covering her face. My husband reached for me again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. My heart felt like it was cracking in slow motion. I took a step back. Not big, just one small step. But it felt like I had walked an entire lifetime away from him. "I need time," I whispered. He nodded, tears falling. I looked at my sister, my own blood, curled on the floor crying. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why she would do this to me. But instead, my heart felt numb. Completely numb. I turned and walked away slowly. Each step felt heavy, like walking through water. I went to my room, closed the door gently, and sat on the floor. No sound came out of me. No tears. Just silence. A silence so deep, it felt like it could swallow my whole life. And in that silence, I realized something painful. My life had been breaking quietly for months. I just didn't see it. But now the pieces were everywhere, and there was no way to pretend anymore. The days that followed were quiet, but heavy. The house felt different now. Every corner held a secret. Every shadow a memory of the storm we had lived through. I moved through it like a ghost, watching, listening, but trying not to touch anything too closely. I spent most of my time in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, or at the window where the sunlight came softly in the morning. It was a fragile kind of peace, the kind that comes after the earthquake and before the rebuilding. My sister stayed with us for a few days after that. She barely left her room. I would hear her crying softly at night, the sound almost a whisper against the walls. I didn't know how to approach her at first. How could I? She had betrayed my trust, my life, and yet she was still my sister. She was still the girl I had raised alongside me, the one I had comforted during storms, the one whose secrets I had held in my hands without judgment. So I did the only thing I could. I let her be. I gave her space, and in giving space, I realized that silence sometimes heals more than words ever can. My husband, he tried. Every day, he tried that he would bring me coffee in the mornings. He would quietly ask if I needed help in the kitchen or with the house. He didn't push me. He didn't demand forgiveness. He just stayed close enough that I knew he hadn't disappeared completely, and far enough that I could breathe. One evening, my sister came to my room. I was sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The sky outside was painted orange and gold. A quiet beauty in a world that had been so loud with chaos only days ago. She stood at the door hesitant. I want to say sorry, she whispered. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I needed to tell you. I didn't answer immediately. I just turned my gaze toward her, taking in her small, trembling figure. She looked exhausted, guilty, and yet still human. I can't promise that everything will be okay, I said softly. But I hear you. I see you. And I still care about you even if I'm hurt. Her shoulders sagged in relief. She took a slow step forward and sat on the floor near me. We didn't speak much after that. We didn't need to. The silence was enough. Days turned into weeks. I started talking to my husband again, slowly, carefully. Not about the betrayal first. Not about the baby. Just small things. Small conversations about food, about chores, about the life we used to share. And in those conversations I realized something. Even after betrayal, love doesn't always disappear. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, more cautious. But it can still exist. My sister eventually told me more about the pregnancy, her fears, and what she thought the future would hold. She didn't ask me for permission or forgiveness. She just spoke the truth, and that alone was enough to make the air feel lighter. I began to understand that this was not just a story about betrayal. It was a story about choices, about courage, about facing consequences and accepting them, even when it hurt the people we loved the most. One morning, my husband came to my room with a small breakfast tray. The food was simple, but the gesture carried a quiet apology that words could not. He placed it beside me and said softly, "I'm not asking you to forgive me yet. I just want you to know, I'm trying. Every day." I looked at him, studying the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small warmth creep into my chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but hope. Because sometimes hope is the first step. And it doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. It just has to exist. The baby's future became the next conversation. We didn't decide everything at once. We didn't make grand plans or promises. We just talked honestly, gently, about what was needed.
We may break, but we can also heal. We can also rebuild. And we can choose love. Even when it is quiet, tentative, and fragile. I still love my sister. I still love my husband. I still love myself. And in that love, I have found the strength to continue. Because that is the lesson life taught me. Even in the darkest storms, even after the deepest betrayal, the heart has a remarkable way of finding its way back to peace, hope, and a quiet kind of happiness. And for that I am grateful.